you have children that are doing things against your will. You keep telling them what to do, and they're disrespecting you to the point that they're rebellious. They're, in my language, it's called oppositional, defiant. What do you do with kids, and specifically about the Yiddishkeit or areas of disrespect? Obviously, how do you deal with that? When do you change from chinuch to loving them? Is actually the language that he used.
Love is not the only answer, although it may seem that way. But professionally, if you're talking to a child who is oppositional, defiant, you don't accept it as bad kid who wants to make his parents miserable. Your first thought is, what do you really want? What's bothering you? What's hurting you? Because nobody behaves like this. Right? This is pathological behavior. It's not normal behavior. So something else is going on. And maybe the answer is the kid doesn't feel loved. But that's the conventional psychology of. But I'm afraid that there is something more essential that a child might be lacking and is therefore rebelling. First of all, you say to a child, be quiet, sit quietly, don't make noise, don't play with don't touch be a good boy, right? So the message is, if you don't do anything and you're quiet, you're good. And the child says, that's not good. That's a trained dog. So you're actually dehumanizing the child by saying, just be quiet and that's good. It's not good. It's just less annoying.
To you.
Yes. The guy says, parents don't care about justice, they just want quiet. So the first thing is, before you say what it takes to be a good child, make sure it has a teichen, because kids are smart. And if you say to them, being quiet and behaving yourself and not talking with your mouth full of food makes you good, they're going to rebel. Tell me what's really good. You're not telling me. Right? But the second thing is, no amount of love is going to give a child a good self-image. Love will only make the child a spoiled brat. What? A spoiled brat. I love you, I love you, I love you. For what? Doesn't matter. Unconditional. The kid says, oh, come on, do me a favor. I have been acting so obnoxious to the best of my ability, and you tell me you love me? You're not listening, right? So what is more important for a child than to be loved? The child has to know that he is necessary. He's indispensable. Lovable or not, he's indispensable. Because I think this is part of the Mashiach development. The truth is that we are not lovable. We are indispensable to the shlichus of Dira B'Tachtenim. If we don't have that sense of purpose, which means importance, love on top of insignificance is a weird mix, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So you imagine parents saying to their children, or even thinking it, we don't need you. We never needed you, but when you're cute, we really love you. That is such a horrible thing to say to a human being. You're not necessary. You're just an adorable pet. The child will rebel.
So there's a man by the name of Avi Fishoff.
Heard of him?
And I happen to agree with him because what you're saying is that it's a pet love, but it's really because you're precious to me. That's why I love you. You're my child. That's why I love you. In other words, you don't have to get a good mark in school. You don't have to jump through hoops for me. I love you because you're here and you're my child, and that's what I appreciate about who you are. It's not as if you're belittling that. It's a preciousness of who he is, because every morning a child says that he's grateful for being brought into this world. The father is grateful for having that child in his life. Now, what happens if the child misbehaves? You love him anyway, because you try to teach him, you try to guide him, but it's not dependent upon what the child does or doesn't do.
So what you're really saying, and I think if people would say it clearly, it would work. What you're saying is, to the parent, the child is precious, necessary, important, unconditionally. Not the love is unconditional. The love comes along with it. But what's unconditional is the relationship. So if you're not important to me, and I say I love you,
but
then it won't work.
Nobody's saying you're not important. So I'm connecting to you. You're my child.
Yes.
You're one with me. You belong in my life, and I appreciate who you are no matter what. It's not a matter of, and it's because you have the ability to be in my life, to be who you are, and I support what you are, what you do, and it's not a matter of having to jump through hoops for me.
See, but we have a very hard time. Ask any parent, is your child essential to you? Important to you?
Of course.
Why? How?
Because they're my child.
What does that mean? Not because. What does it mean that a child is important to you? We don't really have a vocabulary.
We don't what?
We don't have a vocabulary for it. We take it for granted and talk about the love that comes from it. But we got to make it clear that a man without a house is not a man.
Yeah, but necessary is a condition, is it not? What are you necessary for? So that's conditional. If you are going to do the things that you have been put in this world for, to be necessary. So what guides my thought and the way I came to it is, we are living in the bursiki of the Rabbeinu Shalom here, the tannery. It stinks here. But the Rabbeinu Shalom uses it as his perfume. It became a debaisim because he hangs out in the place of our quagmire, so to speak, and he loves us no matter what, even though we're doing all the wrong things. Are we necessary?
Well, I'm saying the same thing about love.
Meaning?
I love you because. Why is that not conditional? So here's what I'm trying to get at. Unconditional means it can't be any other way.
Can't be?
Can't be any other way. In other words, a child has to feel that my existence is not optional to my parents. My not being is not a possibility. That's unconditional. So it's not you're valuable for something. Valuable means I don't see a possibility of being without you. By the way, this applies to husband and wife as well. What does it mean, v'hayu lebasar echad? I can't think of myself if you're not part of that picture, because me without you is not me. The whole point is, it can't be any other way. You can't not exist. Do I love you? When you act lovable, I love you. You act miserable, I'm miserable. I flow with you, I react to you. But that I am yours and you are mine, that's not negotiable. Because what am I without you?
Yeah, but if I don't do what you want, and I don't follow your egotistical way of the way you see me, then I'm nobody, right?
No. Then you're a pain in the neck.
But I love you anyway.
No, but I need you anyway.
Because I love you, and the word I need you, if it's I love you or I need you.
Because love is an emotion. I don't know if an emotion can be unconditional. It's a reaction. It comes from the significance. It doesn't give significance. You can't say, you're important because I love you. That's narcissism. My love makes you important.
We're not saying that.
Right. But we're not being clear about it. We're not emphasizing the significance of your being, which I happen to love. But the significance must come before the love.
So what's the significance about?
See?
So what is the significance? That is conditional upon my love.
It's not.
In other words, the significance, you need to be significant to me as my child.
You are
significant to me.
It's like, what's Avraham without Yitzchak?
What?
What would Avraham be without Yitzchak? Okay, why is it that the oldest son has to get respect from the other siblings because he's the oldest? Why?
The rabbis is achicha agadol.
Because the first son made the father into a father.
Okay.
It's a fundamental, essential change in the father that the first son created. So what we're talking about is, what is the bond between a father and a child? What's the bond? It can't be love. It has to be something that is non-negotiable. Love is always negotiable.
So I think to make a child feel significant, you have to love him. In other words, a child will not feel significant. That's really what it is. Now we got to it. They will not feel significant unless they have their father's and mother's unconditional love. That significance is dependent upon the love that they get from their parents.
This is a big debate that we have very, very often with modern thinking. Love is the most important thing. But the bottom line is, a person can live without love. But if he thinks he's unnecessary, he'll kill himself.
I agree with that. And I heard your theory about that. And I agree 100%. But a child who is young and wild and in this world that we're living today, doing things that are so against what parents value and what parents stand for, suddenly out of the blue they do this, and the father looks at them with a disgust and with a level of saying you're not worth anything because you're not doing what I need you to do, which is to sit at the Shabbos table. I mean, an 11-year-old once told me, in the middle of Kiddush, his little sister, they had 10 kids around the table, and his sister kicked him. He kicked her back. The father didn't see the first kick. In the middle of Kiddush, he looked at him, and he said, with that look, he felt insignificant. And he said, if this is what Judaism is, I'm out of here. These are the words an 11-year-old told me. So that disgust. So to the antidote to that is the love that I speak to the father. I said, you got to love the kid when he's doing what a kid does. It's like you say. What are you condemning the kid because he gave the child a kick and under the table? That's what kids do. So he's significant? Is that what, so what are you telling the father? He's significant. Yes, absolutely. The child is significant. But in order for him to feel that significance, you need to give him the love that he needs.
You need to show it somehow.
So how do you do that besides love?
Okay, so rather than continuing on, if somebody else, a stranger, would love the child, would that be as good as the parent loving the child? In other words, a stranger's love would tell you that you're lovable. It wouldn't tell you that you're necessary, because to the stranger, you're not.
I mean, a mentor is a possibility. A grandparent is a possibility. I've experienced very difficult childhood adults who've lived with literal hatred from parents. But somehow they're functioning well, and what they remember is a period of 3 years that their grandfather walked them to shul and loved them, and there was significance. I agree with the significance, but there was, how do you show significance?
Good question. First of all, do you feel it?
What?
Do you feel it? You know, sometimes parents look at their kid with real anger or hatred, and it's not, I don't love you. I don't want you. That's the devastation.
Yeah.
I can imagine a kid thinking, my father regrets having me. That would be much more damaging than my father doesn't love me. So I'm not underestimating the importance, by the way. We worry about a child being successful when he grows up. We also should worry about a child being successful as a child. A successful child has a better chance of being a successful adult. But we treat childhood as if it's nothing, and when you become 20, then you have to become successful. What is a successful child? A child who got the parents' approval, particularly the father's approval. A child who wins the father's approval is a successful child, because that's all a child really needs growing up is approval, confirmation, which also is not the same thing as love. And that's why when a child knows that he failed and you say, but I love you, you're not dealing with the issue. The child needs to know that he's a successful child. Maybe not this moment, maybe not in this area, but he has his father's approval.
And you have that if the child's being rebellious, as he has approval.
I think the problem begins earlier than that. We're unaware. We're simply not conscious of the fact that the child desperately needs approval. One positive word doesn't have to be lavish compliments, One positive word, like, you did that? That's it.
Anyway, we can go on about this, but going back to Avi Fishoff, so his success, as far as I know, and he claims 100% success with children, and mainly what his goal is to convince parents to love their children unconditionally. And I'm not sure we're really arguing about something, because I think the way he frames this love is about significance. It's not really, I'm not sure we're really arguing. Anyway, I think we're 2.5 minutes over time.
That's all the questions.
We were told to cut it at this point. And yes?
Closing statement, 30 seconds.
Okay.
Closing.
All right. Briefly, chinuch, before we get to solving problems and repairing damage, chinuch means introduce your children to a tainug, to a pleasure that is greater than the pleasure they have. That's called raising children. Raise them from the pleasure that they're aware of to a higher, more edel, more noble, more human pleasure. For example, children, babies, infants, have only one source of pleasure, and that is taste or touch. That's it. That's all the pleasure they know about. We slowly introduce the children to the pleasure of music. You sing them to sleep. And you sing at the table, which is really interesting. While you're having the pleasure of taste and touch, can we introduce something a little edler, a little more music? And children love it and they respond to it. After that, you raise them to a higher level, the level of pleasure from MIDDOS TOVOS. What are all the stories we read to our children, tell our children? People who did good, people who did something special, people who were noble. Right? And look at the pleasure that the child has. Read it again, say it again. It's a greater pleasure than taste and touch. And it's a greater pleasure than music. Not only a higher pleasure, there's Pashut more pleasure. The next step, although there are many in between, the next major step is pleasure from SEICHEL. You ask a child a question or a riddle and he figures it out. He lights up like a, right? And then finally, you develop the pleasure of Avedas Hashem. That is raising the child to the highest level. So chinuch means not disciplining, criticizing, correcting, agonizing. Chinuch literally means whatever level of pleasure the child has, go to the next level. And don't skip a step. If you skip, for example, MIDDOS TOVOS, and you go to SEICHEL, you're going to have a very bright kid who's going to make your life miserable. So don't skip the MIDDOS TOVOS part. That is basically what a yeshiva has to do. That's what parents need to do. And if they didn't do that for you, and the yeshiva didn't do it for you, then you have to do it for yourself. Elevate your pleasure to a higher. Develop a passion for something a little more noble, a little more edel. That's called chinuch. We have a Sunday night program for VIPs that you might be interested in. It's informal, it's questions and answers, it's conversation. It's really relaxed, it's really pleasant, enjoyable, informative, and kind of community-like. It's a Sunday night program, there's a Wednesday morning program for the VIPs, and there's a Wednesday night program. All of it just conversation, casual, laid-back, unscripted. So join us, take a look, click the link below, and see which of the three suits you best, and join us for some enjoyable conversation.